Today we are going to learn cell theory. Many scientists contributed to the cell theory. Here you can see the list of scientists. Okay, so first scientist is Robert Hooke, who had contributed in 1665, and he had identified and named a cell. Means the word cell first of all given by this scientist, and he was Robert Hooke. Second scientist is Leeuwenhoek. We have already discussed about him. Okay, in 1674, observed living cell. He was the first scientist who have observed living cell because he had invented microscope. So he had observed living cell, could see greater detail due to better lenses because he had invented a very good microscope. Then next is a Schleiden. We will discuss in detail. In 1838, noted that plants are made up of cells. Second scientist after the Schleiden, or we can say along with the Schleiden, second scientist is a Schwann. In 1839, near to the Schleiden's years, you can see. Okay, so their work is parallel. So 1839, he had concluded that all living organisms or living things are made up of cells. So these two scientists have the main contribution to give the cell theory. After the work of Schleiden and Schwann, after so many years, in 1855, Virchow had proposed that all cells come from other cells. Means this point was added after the work of Schleiden and Schwann. And finally, cell theory was. Now let me start with the initiation of a cell theory. In 1665, a publication called Micrographia. Here you can see one book is published, and that is a Micrographia, and the author of this book is Robert Hooke, and he was a great scientist, and the word cell is coined by him for the first time. Okay, so he had observed a box-like structures as we have discussed in previous lecture. Okay, he had observed a box-like structures. He had observed in the cork-like plant, and when he viewing a cork tissue through the lenses, okay, and he named that particular structures as a cell. So for the first time he had given the name in the 1670s. Antony von Leeuwenhoek discovered bacteria and protozoa. Later advances in the lenses, as I told you, Leeuwenhoek also discovered a microscope. In previous lecture we have discussed that. Antony von Leeuwenhoek was the first scientist who have observed first time a living bacteria, okay, living organism, because he had invented microscope. And due to this advancement in the technology or lenses or a microscope and the construction in the microscope and the staining technique, other scientists also enabled to see some component inside the cell. Before that, a cellular component was unknown. The microscope we use today are far more complex than those used in the 16th. Okay, by Antony von Leeuwenhoek. And he was a Dutch shopkeeper who had great skill in the crafting in the lenses, and that's why he can means practically he can form the microscope. Despite the limitation of his ancient lenses, Antony von Leeuwenhoek observed the movement of protista, and protista is the group of animals in which single cell organisms are included. And secondly, he had observed a sperm cell, that is a male gametes, okay, which he collectively termed as animalcules. Main scientist whose contribution is very important to form the cell theory is Matthias Schleiden. Okay, and he was a German botanist, and in 1838 examined a large number of plant cells because he was a botanist. Botany is the study of plants. Okay, and that's why he had examined large number of plants, and based on that observations he had seen that it is composed of, means plants are composed of different kind of cells, okay, and which form the tissue of the plant. So ultimately he can conclude, okay, at that time he can conclude that the plants are made up of another scientist who had worked parallelly with the Schleiden, and he was the Theodor Schwann. In 1839 he was a British zoologist, and you know very well zoology is the study of animals, and that's why he had studied a different kind of a different type of animal cells and reported that a cell had a thin outer layer. Okay, every cell will have a thin outer layer, and nowadays, okay, which is today it is known as a plasma membrane. Now all of you also know the outer layer of the cell. Any outer layer of any cell will have a outer layer is called a plasma membrane. Okay, so he has also concluded based on his study that on the plant tissue that the presence of cell wall. Okay, this is the very important note. Okay, very important conclusion that he had observed animal cell without cell wall and plant cell with cell wall. Okay, that's why he had concluded that by these base means on the basis of presence of cell wall or absence of cell wall, we can divide cells into two groups, animal cells and plant cells. So this is very unique research that let me repeat. He also concluded based on his study on the plant tissue, okay, that the presence of cell wall is a unique character of the plant cell, and this was the first time. Okay, he had concluded this statement for the first time, and that is a milestone in the biology, in the cytology. Cytology is a study of cells. Okay, if you want to study a cell structure and related function, then it is called cell biology. Okay, so this is a very good milestone in the biology, in the science of cytology and cell biology. And finally, both these scientists had formulated a cell theory in which 2 points are noted. First point, all living organisms are made up of cells and their products. Okay, and this is the conclusion work of the work done by the Schleiden and Schwann together. Okay, so they have concluded, and that is called cell theory. So first point of a cell theory is all living organisms are made up of cells and their products. Second important point of a cell theory is a cell is a structure and a functional unit of an organism. Okay, so these 2 points are combinedly given by Schleiden and Schwann after so many years work in the field of cell biology. This theory which is given by the Schleiden and Schwann have some limitation and did not explain as to how new cell were formed. Okay, so by using this theory you cannot get the idea how new cells are formed, and this limitation was overcome when the Rudolf Virchow, the another scientist, very good contribution, that is Rudolf Virchow. In 1855, he had first explained that the cell divided and new cells are formed. Means previously one cell is there and it will be divide. Okay, means the pre-existing cell will divide. Okay, and that is called cell division nowadays. Okay, after the cell division only new cell will form, and this was contributed by the Rudolf Virchow. Okay, and that is also called omnicellular cellula. That means cells are formed from the pre-existing cells. Okay, so what is the omnicellular cellula? It means cells are formed from the pre-existing cell. And by this way, cell theory as understood today means a new look of the cell theory today after the work of Rudolf Virchow is as below you can see here. First, all living organisms are composed of cells and the product of the cells. Okay, that is a similar. Then second, all cells arise from the pre-existing cell. This point was added by Rudolf Virchow. So now let me summarize cell theory. So cell theory was firstly formulated by M.J. Schleiden, okay, and in 1838, and the Theodor Schwann, that is in 1839, and main principles of the cell theories are as below you can see. All living organisms are composed of cells and the product of the cell. That is the first point of cell theory. Second point, the body of living organism is made up of one or more cell. That is the second point. And third point, which is nowadays in the cell theory, but it is modified. Okay, it is changed by the Rudolf Virchow in 1855. Okay, and he had explained that a new cell developed from the pre-existing cells, and it is by cell division. Okay, and that is also called omnicellular cellula. That means pre-existing cells, from the pre-existing cell, new cell will be formed by using cell division. Okay, and these all steps or all points are applicable to animal cell as well as to the plant cell. Okay, both type of cells can be applied this cell theory, but you should very clear about this. The cell theory is not applicable to viruses and viroids. Why it is not applicable, we will learn in detail in next chapters. Okay, so up to this you can remember that viruses and viroids cannot follow the cell theory. Okay, they will have a different structure. That's why they cannot follow the cell theory. So finally, we can say that Matthias Lieden contribution is to, means he had said all plants are made up of cells. And what is said by Theodor Schwann after their work? He had said all animals are made up of cells. And what is the contribution of Rudolf Virchow? Cells come from cells, means from the pre-existing cell. This is the final look of the classical cell theory. This whatever we have discussed is all about classical cell theory. Okay, and at that time so many technological limitations were there, but nowadays we have advanced technologies, and due to that day by day we are learning more and more, we are doing researches more and more, and that's why we are adding some points in the cell theory, and by this way nowadays modern cell theory is applicable because we are more rich than the past. Okay, we are more rich in the in field of cell science, or we can say in the cytology, okay, than the past, and that's why we are now using the modern cell theory. Okay, and according to that we can see the points. Let me discuss. Modern cell theory contain four statements in addition to the original cell theory. I mean, original cell theory is as it is, but some more points are added as we are growing in the advancement and in the technology. Okay, the cell contain hereditary information, that is a DNA, which is passed from cell to cell during the cell division. We will learn in detail in the chapter number 10. All cells are basically the same in chemical composition and metabolic activities. That means if you take any cell, any tissue from the body, they have same chemical composition and metabolic activity. Another point, all basic chemicals and physiological functions are carried out inside the cell. Okay, because it is a functional unit, and let's say all chemical and physiological functions are carried out inside the cell. That is a movement, digestion, all the whatever you know the functions. Okay, cell activity depends on the activities of subcellular structures. Okay, means inside the cell there are so many organelles. We will learn in detail in this chapter. Okay, so that cell activity is depend on the activity of subcellular structures, okay, within the cell. Okay, you can understand that organelles present in the cell, within the cell, nucleus, plasma membrane and all that, even mitochondria, you know very well, mitochondria is considered as a powerhouse of a cell. Okay, so by this way, every activity of the cell is depend on the activity of subcellular, means internal organelles. Okay, that is a nucleus, plasma membrane, mitochondria, chloroplast. So now let me identify the points whether it is from modern cell theory or a classical cell theory. Okay, here some points are given. Let me discuss that. All living organisms are made up of cells. This is classical cell theory. Cells are the basic unit of the life. This is also classical theory. Then cells arise from pre-existing cell. This is also from classical theory. Then these point, hereditary information is the pass from the cell. That is a modern cell theory. Okay, all cells have the basic chemical composition. Then energy flow from occurs within the cell. These all are the modern cell theory. So now you get the idea. Okay, which points are added at the classical cell theory and what are the points from the modern cell theory. This is your homework for the today's lecture. First question is the MCQ type question, and the second question is what is the final shape of the cell theory. So you have to write classical cell theory. In next lecture we will learn an overview of a cell. So till that, goodbye.